Hi, everyone. Welcome to Changemaker Chats, a series about passionate people working to change our region into a community where all people thrive, regardless of their income, race, or place. I'm John Wilgers, President and CEO of Greater Twin Cities United Way. I'd like to welcome and introduce today's guest, Paul Williams. Paul is President and CEO of Project for Pride in Living, a Greater Twin Cities United Way funded nonprofit partner. So welcome, Paul, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
So why don't we start out and just have you talk a little bit about the work you do at Project for Pride in Living and how it really does fuel change, lasting change in our community.
Yeah, well, PPL, Project for Pride in Living, is a nonprofit that really focuses on, in our mission, actually, we talk about building hope, assets, and self-reliance, kind of as three elements of what we think makes for strong, healthy individuals, families, and communities. And we've been around for almost 50 years now, and really we're founded by a legendary social activist, social justice advocate, Joe Salvaggio, who really believed in this notion of the dignity and the pride of the poor and of the community, and really a belief that community needs to be kind of at the heart of doing for itself and kind of controlling its own destiny. And so literally we started as a tool lending library where folks could come and borrow tools to fix up their houses. And then it was, well, what about those, two crack houses down the block? And then it was, well, what about some of these bigger projects in and around the neighborhood? And then we started talking with kids and working with kids after school and job skills for adults, and really very entrepreneurial organization over the years that has been all about kind of self-reliance is the term that we use now. That third phrase there is really important for us. And now really we are focused very much on housing stability and career readiness. And our belief is that stable housing and job skills are two of the real kind of centerpieces of building kind of household economic stability. And so that's what PPL has been about for many years and continues to be to this day.
So housing stability, I think everybody would agree that safe, affordable, equitable housing is probably one of the most, if the not most significant issue facing our community right now. I'm assuming you would agree with that, and what's your perspective on that, and are we making any progress there?
Well, yeah, I mean, the last year, certainly since the pandemic kicked in, I mean, we have seen how central, turns out housing is healthcare. If you don't have stable housing, you are at risk of catching this virus and potentially dying. Housing is education. We're educating our kids, right, from our homes. Housing has always been childcare, right? Housing is employment and training. Everyone now is doing their training programs from home. So stable housing as a platform, we've known this for a long time, but stable housing as a platform for so many other things in a household's day-to-day existence is really key. I do think we're making progress. It is a heavy lift. We've known from past task forces and past studies that in a good year we produce about 3,000 units of affordable housing statewide. We know from the studies that we need to be producing another 10,000 net additional units of affordable housing annually. And so we've got a big supply problem, without a doubt, that continues to fuel high rents, people having to pay a high portion of their income for rent. And that has, again, impacts on a lot of other areas of life. It also fuels some of the housing instability where we've seen increases in homelessness in recent years. So we've got a very productive housing sector here that is doing a lot, but we need to magnify that work, and there's a lot of different pieces to that. It's complicated. It's a heavy lift, but we continue to chip away at it.
You mentioned the pandemic, and certainly how have you pivoted in terms of the way you serve your communities, and in terms of the services you provide, but also how have you pivoted in terms of how you as an organization do your work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it certainly is the pandemic, and COVID-19 certainly has been one of the drivers that have forced a lot of changes. But I also think the murder of George Floyd, the social unrest, the political unrest through the election, through the end of the year, the racial unrest, all has been a reality for the folks who live with us and come through our programs day in and day out, and the neighborhoods and communities that we live in. So PPL again has been working in and around the South Minneapolis Lake Street area for 50 years, the north side of Minneapolis 20 plus years, east side of St. Paul, Summit U, University Avenue. So the impact of all of that was significant on our folks, and it forced us, housing is critical. And so for us, maintaining that stable housing for folks and supporting people in their homes really became even more important. And so things like on the employment side, we really had to pivot to more of a virtual learning environment. We run a couple of alternative schools. Kids that aren't making it in the Minneapolis public schools followed all the protocols that all the schools were going with, but again, figuring out issues of food security and how do we get meals. Those lunches are critical for a lot of those young people. And technology, providing technology for the students who were studying from home, providing technology for all of our residents in our housing was a key pivot. So all of that, along with the employment and training work, kind of pivoting to a virtual training environment was pretty significant.
Do you have any thoughts about what the pandemic and the economic environment has done to the jobs market, particularly as it relates to those people that you are, working to train to get out there and fill those positions?
Kind of looking at career pathways, actually, and not just getting somebody a job, but getting somebody a job in a sector that has some career pathways, some opportunities to move up. And healthcare is one of those. And obviously, the hospital systems, the healthcare systems have been significantly impacted by this, but we don't think healthcare in the long run is going away. It's going to change, and there's opportunities to get into healthcare and then work your way up and move into other positions and kind of stack credentials over time. We think government, office administration, banking and finance, some of those professional services, there are opportunities there that we think are going to start coming back, particularly later in this year. I think is when we'll really see some of that economic activity start to return, to perhaps its former level. But it's going to be, it's going to be a year or two before we kind of get back, especially in that lower moderate wage segment of the economy, I think, to kind of a stable or growing place.
Well, what have you seen, Paul, from people and organizations that support your work? It seems that the events that you just listed of the last year, the murder of George Floyd, the pandemic, the political division, the civil unrest, all those things, and awareness that was maybe there before. There are organizations, businesses, individuals that are realizing or experiencing a responsibility to step up in a new way. Are you seeing that with organizations that support your work?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think the increased attention and focus on these issues, and I think genuinely people want to know, how can I help? I think they genuinely, corporations really stepped into, this is a moment where we need to learn and listen, and I think that's genuine. I think the question is, will it be sustained? Mm-hmm. And will it have depth? And will we learn some new ways of doing business? And I talk about, community engagement needs to be a regular way of doing business. We shouldn't just kind of episodically kind of go out and listen to the community and hear what people have to say and do some relationship. This needs to be an ongoing way of doing business. In other words, getting out, talking with community, thinking about who's in the room, who's at these tables. I think in some different ways. That's what leads to genuine voice and the building of capacity and power in communities. I think one of the things that we've seen with this series of pandemics, including the social unrest and the George Floyd murder, is folks not really recognizing that we need to build capacity in communities of color, that we need to walk with community, not on community. We need to do things with community, not for community. And I think we've suffered from some of that in the past. So I think it's an incredible inflection point in terms of a genuine level of interest and engagement. The question is, will we build some practices out of this that really help sustain that?
Yeah. So when we started the conversation, Paul, you mentioned that Project for Pride in Living really is working to build hope, assets, and self-reliance. And so I'll ask a final question, and that is, what gives you hope, Paul, when you look at where we are and where we have to go? What gives you hope?
Yeah, well, I really believe that what we were just talking about, the number of the level of engagement and interest, I think, is hopeful. And I think to be quite honest, the wide diversity of voices that are out there kind of in our public discourse, including some very challenging voices, I think that's a hopeful thing. It's messy, it's noisy, it's disruptive. I think we need some disruption, to be quite honest. But I'm hopeful about that. I think more folks being at the table with genuine voice and a genuine opportunity to connect and be heard and have influence, I think is all a hopeful thing. I'm excited about some of the energy and kind of the emerging entrepreneurs of color. Just spent time this last week kind of checking up on how things are going along Lake Street, and there's movement there. There's possibility, opportunity there that I am excited about, and seeing more Black businesses of color, seeing more entrepreneurs of color kind of across the board, to me is exciting. That is where 75% of new business growth comes out of smaller entrepreneurial diverse communities, right? And when you look at the demographics of our workforce, increasingly we will have to depend on those communities of color to fuel the competitiveness and just the strength of the Twin Cities region. I'm hopeful about that, because those are trends that we have to pay attention to, and I'm energized by that.
Yeah. Well, Paul, thank you for your time today. Thanks for being a change maker. I know we are all working together on these problems, because these are problems that none of us can address alone. So again, thanks for joining me, and we look forward to visiting with you again.
Good. Well, thank you to United Way for your leadership and for reaching out. So